Hey everyone, welcome back to Reviewing 2, the channel where I spend 2 hours playing a game and then give you my honest thoughts on the gameplay, performance, and story without giving away too much. Why 2 hours? Well, because I think 2 hours is enough time to judge a game based on its graphics, story, and performance while leaving the best parts for you to enjoy. As always, I will be setting all graphical options to as medium as they go, with DLSS set to balanced when possible, ray tracing turned off when possible, and a frame rate cap of 120. I do this because I think these are relatable settings, and I don't think the average gamer is going to be playing these games on max with everything dialed to 11. I also set the difficulty to medium as I am not the best game in the world and I want to give every game a fair shake. This week's game, Doom: The Dark Ages. Let's jump in. Coming off a fresh replay of Doom Eternal, it's safe to say I was excited for this game. The movement, combat, and gore of the Doom game always hit the mark for me, and The Dark Ages hits it well. While Doom Eternal focused on speed, weapon swapping, and using the right tool for the right enemy, The Dark Ages takes a different approach. There are two big changes in Doom: The Dark Ages. One of them is the addition of the shield, Slayer's new offensive and defensive tool against the hordes of hell. You can block attacks, you can parry green attacks, you can throw at a bigger enemy to stun them, and my personal favorite, Shield Bash. The Shield Bash lets you lock onto an enemy and charge right into them, doing an AoE of damage and also letting you jump right into the fight. While I did not find any form of dashing or double jumping in my 2 hours, the shield allowed for that fast-paced feel that Eternal brought with it. You could lock onto an enemy from a shockingly far distance and dash right to them. The other big change from the previous game is the melee system. In Doom Eternal you had the Blood Punch, and that was it. In Doom: The Dark Ages, there is a whole new melee system. Melee recharges over time and can be recharged instantly upon power pick. Using these melee charges against enemies drops armor, ammo, and health. Now I only encountered one of the three choices in my playthrough, that being the power comet, but I do know that there are two others. The addition of these melee weapons to their combat flow works really well, as the melee has a long lunge and each melee weapon has different effects. They are a staple of combat in the Dark Ages, and they really help drive home the fact that you are the Doom Slayer. Doom: The Dark Ages puts a heavy emphasis on the shield use, especially the parrying aspect, as well as the melee weapons, but this does not mean they left out the guns. In this installment, you better believe the Doom Slayer has a new arsenal, one that looks and feels as awesome as everything else in this game. Initially, I was skeptical, as Eternal put such a large focus on switching weapons and gathering ammo that at times it felt like a chore. I couldn't use the weapon I wanted as it was either out of ammo or not the intended weapon for these enemies. Doom: The Dark Ages does away with that system in an interesting way. While there are still weapons best suited for certain situations, such as the plasma gun for energy shield popping, I found that ammo was plentiful enough that I could use whatever gun I wanted. And that felt great. I got to explore the guns I liked without being forced to use the guns I did not like. There are three more or less new gameplay aspects, that being the turret, dragon, and Atlan sequences. The turret sequences are simple. You hop on a turret, you mow down a bunch of demons, and usually use the charged up blast to hit a larger demon. That's it. It's nothing crazy, but it is satisfying for a point. The dragon sequences are a little different. You get to fly around on this badass cyber dragon and take out ships and enemies with the mounted guns. Now it does get a little repetitive, as the gameplay loop is simply lock on, shoot, dodge, shoot with a charged up shot, rinse and repeat, but it still remains fun. Last of the three is the Atlan sequences. Now these were my favorite of the three new gameplay aspects. The Slayer hops into this giant 30-story tall mech and dukes it out with these giant demons. While the controls are simple, left click to punch, right click for rocket punch, and space to dodge, these sequences just felt awesome. Mechanic-wise, it's similar to the dragon, with the difference being punches instead of shooting, except at certain times, and the charge shot being this awesome palm fist. This succeeds in giving that real steel vibe, and seeing the giant demon corpse fly away from your finisher really seals in that, holy crap, I'm in a giant mech bare-knuckle brawling giant demons. In Doom Eternal, you progress through the level and you would come across sentinel coins, crystals, and runes. Coins will let you upgrade your suit, crystals will let you increase your health, armor, and ammo, and runes would change how the game plays slightly, such as giving you increased full kill range or slowing down time when you take critical damage. In Doom: The Dark Ages, progression is a little different. The map in the Dark Ages at times is somewhat open world. You have your objective marker and the path you need to take, to progress, and then there are 3 or 4 other paths that lead to enemy encounters, collectibles, and so on. Taking these paths often leads to gold, rubies, or enemies that once killed increase either your armor, health, or ammo. With these currencies, you can upgrade your guns, melee weapons, and shield. Each gun still keeps the 2 variants as with Eternal, but sporting all new effects such as the Cycler, which is the Dark Ages equivalent to the plasma gun, building up a charge on enemies when hit for long enough that then will jolt to nearby enemies. During my wait for this game, I did watch quite a bit of reviews myself, and one of the more consistently mentioned changes is that you're not quite as fast as in Eternal, and it's more of a stay your ground and fight sort of Slayer. While this is partly true, it doesn't grasp the situation perfectly. Yes, with the shield and the ability to parry, you have more staying power in a fight than any other Doom game. But this does not mean the Slayer is slow by any means. To combo the shield bash and the melee lunge range, the player can dash around the battlefield in a very similar fashion to Eternal. All in all, the game makes you feel like the Slayer, less of a glass cannon like in Eternal, and more of an absolute menace to anything on the battlefield unlucky enough to call you foe. Sprinting through the battlefield and hearing the Slayer's loud metallic footsteps, getting right into the face of any demon you desire, the awesome metal soundtrack in the background. The Dark Ages took a chance when switching up the formula, and it works. I cannot stress enough how awesome it feels to play this game. You truly do feel like a tank. Jumping into a large group of enemies with a shield bash, parrying a green attack from an elite and then using your melee combo to knock them out of the fight, turning and focusing on another elite while throwing your shield into another wait your turn kind of moment. It is awesome. At times it can be a bit overwhelming as there's definitely a learning curve, but once you overcome that initial stress of there are a lot of projectiles coming at me, what do? It connects really fast. And if it gets too difficult or stressful, there are a multitude of different difficulty options, and not just your easy, medium, hard, etc. kind of choices. You can modify the parry window, the game speed, enemy aggression, projectile speed, damage to player, damage to demons, and so many more. The perfect middle ground for those who enjoy the playstyle of Doom but either want to stay more or less casual with default settings, or for those who want to push themselves or make it similar to older Doom titles. Doom: The Dark Ages serves as a prequel to Doom 2016, and as such, a little clarity on the timeline might be needed. Doom Eternal is the most recent in the timeline, and before it is the 2016 reboot of Doom, Doom 2016. Doom: The Dark Ages takes place in the gap after Doom 64 and before Doom 2016, closer to Doom 2016. As we meet the Slayer once again, he's a little different. Obviously, his armor and arms are more gothic than Eternal, as is appropriate for the theme, but he has a glow in his eyes and on his chest. We later find out that this is a restraint of sorts put on him by the Makers. They know his power and fear him using it against them, so they put a leash on him and use him as a weapon, deploying him to aid their allies and to do their bidding, and it is one such occasion where I first step into the Slayer's boots. Demons are overrunning a village where King Novik and allies are stationed. Seeing the odds dip drastically in the enemy's favor, the Slayer was deployed. As you rip and tear through the hordes of demons, learning how to utilize your new tools and abilities, you end up at a beach and defend it from a large attacking demon. Upon defeating said demon, the Slayer is beamed up to the Maker's ship, and we then see the truth. The Makers house him in a chamber of sorts, locking his movement and purifying his mind of everything but his rage after every deployment. We see him fight against this, but ultimately the Makers regain control. Deployed constantly to engagements with demons and used as a weapon for the Makers to use as they please, you can't help but get a little mad. This is a man who fought an endless number of demons to save Earth, time and time again, reduced to this thing that the Makers use at their bidding. The anger subsides though, as you get to take it all out on those demons and their buddies. While 2 hours is not enough to get the whole story, at this stage I think it is clear what kind of story it is trying to tell. They're giving us more information on what the Slayer's time at the Sentinels was like, as well as more information on who King Novik was and his relationship with the Slayer. Doom Eternal set up a lot of lore for the Slayer during his time in Hell, a massive part being his joining the Sentinels, and so far I can tell this lore is being further fleshed out with this installment. Coming from Doom Eternal, where things are definitely brighter and more colorful, Doom: The Dark Ages is a major shift. It's darker, as the name implies, with a more faded color palette. The ammo drops that once were in multitude of colors have been reduced to a single moot orange. Now this might sound bad, but for the setting and theme, it works extremely well. The Dark Ages is set to be a darker, grittier game than its predecessor. It's taking place during a war, with people dying and buildings being destroyed. It would feel weird having purple ammo and glowing bright green pickups in this theme. That's not to say there are no more green armor pickups, but the brightness has been toned down to fit the thematic premise. And just like Eternal, the game is beautiful. The texture work, the gore, the armor and weapons, it all looks amazing. Id kind of found their niche when it came to genre, so they've had a lot of practice in this department, but it still is stunning. The first thing that comes to mind is when the Slayer picks up the power gauntlet. Seeing the chainmail, the sheen of the metal, the sound of it all works extraordinarily well. Even the fur cape the Slayer is sporting looks good. Usually textures like that in games have a habit of bugging out or looking flat, but not in this case. And knowing these graphics are set to medium with DLSS on really shows how good they can look, as of course they could be set much higher. Just to remind everyone watching, this performance was taking with everything set to as medium as it gets, DLSS set to balance, and the frame cap of 120. Going over the performance is pretty cut and dry. The game runs well. I didn't experience a lot of FPS drops. I didn't find anything that ruined my FPS consistently. And trust me, I tried my fair share of activities that are notorious for dropping frames in video games. That being said, there were some pretty major freezes that happened during my 2 hours. I more than met the requirements for the game, and I double checked I had updated to the newest driver, but the freezes persisted. And to clarify it, these freezes were not just the game froze, wait a minute for it to unfreeze. No, these were no interactions whatsoever, no matter how long I wait, force close with Task Manager kind of freezes. Now I did take a peek at their known issues list, two of which are using RiverTuner and OBS, causing issues, both things I used during this review. Knowing this, I did my due diligence and turned off RiverTuner and tried just OBS. It still froze. I then tried playing about an hour without recording. I know, reviewing too, but don't worry, outside of this performance segment, nothing I learned or did in that time is in this review. And while it did still freeze, it froze less. A game freezing can be overlooked, and it can be forgiven if it only happens an X amount of times. But for it to freeze so much in a 2-hour span is a massive detriment. Not only did I have to restart the game, at times from the start of the level, but it breaks immersion immensely. I would start getting really into it, feeling the flow of combat, and then I'd go for a shield bash or execution and it would freeze, destroying all that engine. Doom: The Dark Ages set out to be another installment of the Doom franchise with a twist. A different playstyle of sorts, while still being grounded in the beloved franchise's own personal feel. I believe this is done amazingly. The shield, parrying, the partly open world, the story, it all connects really well. I really enjoyed playing it and had an incredibly hard time putting it down to write this review. That being said, the freezes which ultimately led to me having to force close the game have been just frequent enough to kill any and all momentum I would build up. Knowing that my recording software and performance reading software possibly played a part in that aspect, I can't fault them too much on this, and I hope to see it resolved soon. That is why I'm giving Doom: The Dark Ages a 9.1 out of 10.